Hello YouTube, welcome back to the channel. So it's been a super busy week work-wise, so I haven't had the chance to put together any kind of a video, but I got a chance to watch this video here that I'm going to share with you, and I'm going to include a link to this in the description. So this is John, this is Wade Boggs Fan, and I do recommend that you check it out because I think he did a very good job as far as kind of looking into this question that he puts here. And the question was, is it wrong to want sports card prices to crash? And the reason I like this video is because it's more of a thoughtful take. It's kind of sitting back and kind of working through. It's really not drawing a definitive conclusion at first. It's kind of just talking through the idea from kind of both sides in terms of the good side of it, which is why I like the little icon. The reason I froze it on this section here is he's got the little angel on the one shoulder, and then obviously there'd be like a little devil on the other shoulder. So it's like, is it wrong? Is the question. Is it wrong to want sports card prices to crash? And I do want to actually touch on this topic. Think it's a great one. Even though, like I said, it's been busy, I haven't been able to formulate. I've got some ideas for some videos I want to make, but I got to sit down and really sketch out kind of what I want to do with it. But this one's great because I got a chance to watch this video today, and now I can kind of play off of what John said and then kind of add my own kind of angle to it. So it's a little bit of a video response, but also at the same time, just some thoughts that I have. Because right now, the topic du jour, a lot of videos out there on YouTube, folks, for people that actually still make videos, which is another category in and of itself. But folks that still do make videos about anything, one of the prevailing themes now, because it is the topic du jour, is the sports card market crash, the declining prices, this, that, and the other thing, and we touch on that during the live stream. That's always going to be part of it because obviously it's on people's minds with economic factors and other things, and that's kind of going to play into it. So right now, that is a topic that people can throw out there, which is kind of interesting. And the reason I like this particular video is because it didn't take the standard take. It just kind of posed the question. It said, is it wrong? So let's touch on a couple of things related to this, and I'll kind of come around to the question itself and kind of pose it from my angle. Now, one caveat I'm going to give off the top, because this is not a right or wrong answer kind of thing. It's more of a, how do you feel about it? How do you approach the hobby? What are your goals as far as that's concerned? And also, how the mentality you take into it. So your mileage may vary on this. You can be 100%, 180 degrees diametrically opposed to what I am. And I'll tell you off the top, I'm a little bit different in kind of my approach to most people, but I will try to explain to you why, so you at least understand it. And I'd also honestly like to get your take on it, kind of where you stand on the same question and the same topic. And thank you again to John for posing a very interesting question. So let's kind of talk about this for a little bit. And one of the thoughts that first came to my head is, again, I'm a big fan of pointing out the extremes that a lot of folks take in the hobby because they're very reactionary. It's a very emotional thing, and that it's to be expected, honestly, and it's one of the normal things that you kind of see in this kind of thing, especially when you talk about a hobby where people get very passionate about it. But I've always found it very interesting, and a reoccurring theme I like to go back to on the channel, specifically on the live stream, is that collectors oftentimes have very unrealistic expectations about what they expect certain things to do. Sometimes it's warranted, but sometimes, honestly, it's not. They want certain things, but they want it in a way that's not very realistic. And I'll come back to this video here in a second, but I want to share with you this little image here. And this is something I've referred to previously, but it's great to have a nice picture on the screen here that I can share with you. And this is what's called the priority triangle. It goes by a few other names that I've seen, but the key piece is that you've got three points here in the triangle. One of them is quality, one of them is speed, and one of them is price. And the idea here is that if you want quality and you want a lower price, it's going to take you longer to do it because usually if you want to speed it up, it's going to cost you more. If you want it to be fast and you want it to be a lower price, you're going to usually have to sacrifice for quality. And if you want something that's quality and something that's fast, it's usually going to cost you more. Why? Because you have to devote more resources to it. So it means there's a trade-off here. You can have two of these three things, but you generally can't have all three things at the same time. That's not really possible in a realistic scenario. And the reason I share this with you is because usually where this comes up is where I look at people talking about stuff like, kind of current cards as far as, value proposition boxes and things like that. And I've always found it very entertaining, and kind of a thing that I like to poke fun at a lot is that it seems that collectors oftentimes, again, in the scope of, in the realm of not being realistic about this, they want to have cheap boxes that yield quality cards that hold value and maybe even go up in value, which doesn't make any sense at all. Because if the boxes are that cheap, well, then most likely they had to print a lot of cards in order to put out enough quantity to be able to make it up in volume. Well, if that's the case, probably the cost of those cards is going to be very low. So instead of a $500 or $5,000 box, you're going to have a $50 box. Great. But that also means the cards out of it, instead of having $50 worth of cards, you're going to get $5 worth of cards. We just have to scale everything down accordingly. If you get a $50 box, it is not realistic to expect $200 worth of value that, a year down the road is still $200 or more worth of value. That doesn't make any sense Because if that was the case, then the box wouldn't be $200. The secondary market would catch up, and then all of a sudden it would skew and adjust the price accordingly. That's just how economics work. But a lot of times people seem to want to defy economics. And I bring this up because again, it's the unrealistic expectation of the collector versus the reality. It's just a general theme that I touch on regularly. But let's circle it back around here to this question. Is it wrong to want the sports card market to crash? A lot of that is going to be based on kind of the angle you take to it. I'm just going to say at the surface, I would say no. Is it wrong to want? No, because you have very limited control over it. So you can want anything you like. And I'd have no issue with someone wanting this. But I always kind of question the idea of why they would want it. Well, the logical reason that some people would want it is that, well, it would make certain things that are no longer affordable to be more affordable. Yes. Now, as always, there is, a counterbalance to this. And John does a very good job kind of expressing this. And the counterbalance is that if prices go down and it goes down in enough categories, the likelihood is it would go down in other categories. And that's kind of the thing that people kind of have to accept. So if enough stuff goes down, then that also means the value of your collection, quote unquote, also goes down. On paper, even if you're a collector and you have no intention of selling, it would still go down in value. Now, that in and of itself is very simplistic. It's straightforward. Like, you can kind of work your way around it. And John, like I said, John here does a great job as far as talking through the implications in it. But I wanted to throw a little wrinkle into it that I think would be a more interesting thought exercise. It's more of an extreme. And just to be clear, it is the unlikeliest of unlikely scenarios. It is because even in this video, a caveat is made. It'll never go to zero. And the likelihood is it won't. The likelihood is someone would want it even if it's for $1, pretty much no matter what happens, as long as civilization exists. That's something you have to bear in mind. But that's always the qualifier. Whenever someone talks about that they say, I want this, those sports card market prices to crash, even from where we are right now and keep going down further, because again, it's gone down substantially from the absolute highs in a lot of categories, but in a lot of instances, it's still higher than it was pre-pandemic. And that's the qualifier that a lot of folks put in. They would like to see it go back to the pre-pandemic pricing, or even in some cases lower, crash, like really crash compared to the heights that it got, and go back down and maybe even below where it was before. Maybe instead of 2019 prices, we're talking 2017, 2016, 2015. Pick your year that you want. Hell, 1995 prices, whatever. You pick whatever you want to, whatever you decide. But the point is that every single time that kind of an exercise or question is posed, it always comes up, it is always followed with the understanding and the qualifier, and reasonably so, that whenever we hit bottom, whatever that is going to be, that eventually there would be a recovery and a rebound to it. Preferably, and a lot of folks throw in this qualifier, preferably a rebound that is, organic and controlled, as opposed to this sudden spike back upward that is very inorganic, that creates the scenario for this price volatility. I don't think anybody would want a recovery that involves, okay, so it went down to this level, this card was $5,000 at the peak, now it's suddenly $500, and now it's back up to $15,000. I think that kind of, volatility is very unhealthy. I think everybody agrees with that. But what I always kind of think is kind of fun is one of the points that John makes on the opposite side of the spectrum is that obviously he would like, as a collector, he would like the prices to go down to allow him the opportunity to be able to go get some things. But he also points out something very accurate and very truthful, in that it's difficult for collectors who have devoted a lot of time, and especially who have devoted a lot of money over years in a lot of cases, to their collections, to see the prices go down. And because if it did go down in a sustained way, like let's take it to the extreme here for a moment. Again, the hypothetical zombie apocalypse, nuclear holocaust of the hobby here. We're going to the ultimate extreme. The price downturn goes to such a point that a lot of folks liquidate, they get out of it. Even some longtime collectors get frustrated with the whole thing, and they just get rid of, basically they offload their stuff. The market gets flush with a lot of inventory, including everything. Because this is always a fun caveat here. Because a lot of times it's the vintage guys who say, like, well, vintage, what if it didn't? What if vintage went down just like everything else? Modern goes down 90%, vintage goes down 90%. Now, there are some people who would be rubbing their hands together, licking their chops, but here's the caveat that always gets put in, the one I talked about a second ago. The idea is always, they like the idea because there's always this inherent built-in understanding that eventually, when it hits bottom and we flush out enough people out of the system that probably shouldn't have been there in the first place, or that weren't there, as long-term collectors, then, the pure collectors would remain, and therefore, slowly, organically, these prices would start to creep back up, and then you'd be able to applaud yourself at the great bargain price you were able to get a 52 tops mantle for the first time in 20 years. Suddenly you can afford it. Fantastic. Now it's part of your collection. You're able to finish your 52 top set. Congratulations. Good job by you. But in this hypothetical, zombie apocalypse, nuclear holocaust version, what if it's, this bargain, kind of like the monkey's paw? All right, you get what you want, but it doesn't come back. Yes, you get the price discounts you're looking for, but the rest of your collection goes down right along with it. And it stays down. Not for a month, not for a year, not for 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, 20 years. The price does not rebound. It hits this low and just stagnates. You bought your 52 tops mantle, you got it, but it's worth the same now as it was 20 years ago. And it just stays. And it doesn't matter how much time you wait. As a matter of fact, because with inflation, it's actually worth less than it was at the time you bought it. You're still losing money on it, even if it stays static. Not a likely scenario. Absolutely not going to happen. More than likely, it would be 1/1,000,000% likelihood of that. But I pose the question, and that is kind of again, in this extreme alternate scenario, would you still want that price reduction to that degree? Is that still something that would be desirable to you, with that understanding that the rest of your collection also goes down with it? You're not exempt. None of the stuff you have is safe. It all goes down. Would you be willing to make that bargain? Is the desire to have this stuff enough to make you be willing to sacrifice everything else? Are you willing to take the money that you have put in and that time and just accept that you're not getting it back? It doesn't matter how long you wait. Again, not likely, but that is always kind of a fun question, because it's the ultimate extreme. It's kind of it's the test to see exactly what it is you want as far as your collection is concerned. So I can't answer that for anybody else. So my answer to the question, and I know I've kind of talked around it a little bit, so I apologize. This is more of a talky video anyway, but I don't think it's wrong to want it. I think it's certainly, I could understand that, especially from a collector's perspective, that they might be interested in having that. And again, I'm on the outlier extreme of it. A lot of times especially in the live stream, I will kind of play devil's advocate for the sake of argument to get. And I gave you this extreme example here, and I want to get your opinion. I'm offering two alternate scenarios. The more realistic scenario, where the prices go down to a certain point, it hits whatever the bottom is going to be, and then obviously begins a steady recovery. That could be very advantageous for you as a collector. That'd be great. But my question was, what if it doesn't? What if it drove away enough people where the price just doesn't recover? Or it doesn't recover to a point to make it worthwhile comparatively to the decline if it went across the board? Now, here, John makes one of the other points that I think is very valid for most people. No matter how much they say they don't care about the money, they still wouldn't feel good having invested that money into it over years, and in some cases, maybe even decades, and just not getting the value back ever. And it just never being worth what they paid for it. No matter what, it stays down, and in your lifetime, it never recovers. A lot of folks would not be okay with that. And understandably so. And I'm not going to judge anybody that's in that boat, because that's pretty much everybody, except there are some folks that are a little bit on the outlier extreme of it. And this is not a devil's advocate situation. I'd be kind of in the outlier extreme, but I'll kind of explain to you why. And I touch on it in the live stream a lot. I kind of have fun with the idea, the whole blood in the streets thing. But the reason for it is that, in all honesty, yes, I've put in time. Yes, I've put in a reasonable amount of money, not like crazy. Some people have definitely spent more, but I've spent more than most that are in the hobby that aren't putting together multi-million-dollar collections. So I've definitely invested some time and some money into my collection over the years. But the thought that I have with it is that, because my collection is not stuck in one category, and this is that's why I gave kind of that extreme, doomsday scenario. If I think about it, if my collection dropped along with the rest of this, my collection isn't just hockey, it isn't just baseball, it's a little bit of different categories, it's a little bit of modern, it's a little bit of vintage, so it's across the board. So if it went down across the board, everything, nothing is safe, as I laid out that scenario for you, in that scenario, well, if my collection goes down like that, well, then other people's collections are going to go down like that as well. Because I've got even a touch of non-sports, some other stuff, some of the wrestling cards that I get for fun and stuff like that. Even my Sharknado cards, my precious Sharknado. If it all goes down, absolutely down, 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 then the likelihood is all the collectors around me, their stuff is going down too. And I'm in that position where, just playing out the scenario and just thinking about it in my head, I'd be kind of okay with that. That would be kind of fun for me. Now, obviously, it never feels good to, oh man, but you spent that money over those years. You could have spent it on something else, and but this thing went down and you lost that money. It's like, well, yeah, but as long as the stuff stays in my collection, like, I've lost the money technically until I sell. I've lost the money anyway. The money's already spent. Like, it's gone. And that's always been kind of this weird little mental gymnastics that collectors play with themselves. Yes, hypothetically, if, let's say when things were booming, hypothetically, maybe your collection appreciated a ton. And if you were to sell it, you'd make, this massive profit, or whatever the case is. Or maybe you break even, or whatever the case may be now, depending on where you're sitting. There's a lot of stuff that I have that has gone up, and there's some stuff that I paid for it where it's gone down a little bit. It just depends on what you bought and when you bought it, and all that put together. But my thought process is that, like, once the money is spent, the money is spent. Of course, I do take advantage of things and kind of move some stuff off to get a little bit of money back to then kind of recycle it and move it around. But if for whatever reason, like it all went to quote unquote zero, which is the doomsday scenario, ultimate extreme, that means a bunch of other people went to zero. And, you know, my trolley heart notwithstanding that you guys sometimes see on the live stream a little bit, I would actually get more entertainment just on the understanding that there are people with multi-million dollar collections. I would just love to see them freak out. I would happily sacrifice all the value of my collection just to watch, just to hear the complaints, just to hear the protestations, the cry out to the heavens. How can this, misfortune befall me? All that time and all that money that I've put into this, and what has happened? That would be worth its weight in gold. But again, I acknowledge fully that I am way on the outlier of this. I will sacrifice every dime of my collection's value to see that. I would love it. For the sheer entertainment value alone. Like, I've got no issue with that. I'm willing to hold on to worthless cardboard if it entertains me. But obviously, again, not realistic. And also, for most people, that is definitely not the case. I acknowledge my small subsection of the hobby that I reside in where I'd be okay with that. Most other people will certainly not. But it is kind of a fun thought experiment. It is a fun thought exercise. And I do think it is a good idea from time to time to kind of take a question like this and really kind of talk through it with yourself and just kind of think about where you sit on it. What would you feel comfortable with? What would you like? So the question was, is it wrong? You can answer that for yourself. The second question is, okay, so let's say you do get a further correction and the opportunity presents itself. Are you even still comfortable throwing money in right now? Even if we see a further decline and it goes down to the bottom, because there are other things also that are going down. The stock market's down, crypto's down. These other categories are also down. Are there other priorities that take precedence? Even if these opportunities, quote unquote, present themselves to be able to get these cards for your collection cheaper, is that still something you'd be comfortable doing while maybe other opportunities present themselves, or maybe while other priorities maybe take precedence? And that's a question that only you can answer for yourself. And it's just something I kind of pose out there. And that's why I thought it would be kind of fun to kind of go through this, take the initial concept, the original question, and kind of expand it out a little bit again into a more extreme example, but also kind of pose the question of, where your head's at as far as that's concerned. So I definitely would like to get, some thoughts and opinions on this one. This one is no right answer. You can feel however you're going to feel about it. I'm just curious where your head's at this stage in the game. Would you like, if the understanding was that the rest of your collection is also going to take a similar hit, would you like to see the prices continue to go down? Would you be okay if the prices stayed down? Even if not forever, like in that extreme example I gave, would you be okay if the prices stayed down for 5 or 10 years? Like, I mean, a longer period of time. You got to think a little bit longer period. Would you still be okay with that? Is that a worthwhile sacrifice in the short term for the next 5 or 10 years to then potentially be able to fill in maybe some other projects or sections of the collection you're building? Is that something you'd be okay with? Or is that something that, would bother you a little bit as the rest of your collection also followed suit? Because in this scenario, we're not sparing anybody. We're trying to keep it even as possible to kind of really put through the thought experiment. That's something I kind of would like to get your thoughts and take on. Anyway, so that's it for now. Thank you again to Wade Boggs Fan for providing a very interesting prompt for kind of an impromptu video. I didn't take any notes on this one. I just kind of grabbed the microphone and talked. More videos coming up on the channel. Live stream will be coming up Friday, 8 p.m. Eastern time. I may do one more video between now and then if I've got the time. I'll see if I can do it. Right now, hobby news wise, I don't think there's too much going on, so we'll probably take it easy on that this week. We'll see. We'll see what the live stream holds for us and what we can come up with, but we'll take it a step at a time and go from there. Otherwise, hopefully your summer otherwise is going well. Hopefully things are going well wherever you are. Thanks very much. We'll catch you in the next one.